also start out and kind of share a little bit about your assignments and why you chose to work for Portland Police Bureau?
Yes, so I originally started here as a volunteer working in the missing persons unit, and then ultimately got recommended for a paid position working under the grant in the cold case homicide unit. And that ended up being kind of the pivotal experience in my life that even led me to consider becoming a police officer. I had no intentions of doing it whatsoever. And now looking back, I have no regrets about it, even despite the way things are. But that got me to apply to become a Portland police officer. And during the almost 8 years that I've worked here as a police officer, I've worked on patrol, I've worked with the human trafficking unit, I worked on the gang enforcement team, and when the name changed, the gun violence reduction team. And then I've also worked and still do work part-time or detached in the training division as well, teaching new hires in the advanced academy, as well as helping out during annual in-service to sworn members that work here.
You fit a lot in a short time, and we're glad that it worked out for you to join us. I've worked with you before, and I just know you to be one of the best. So we know there's been a lot of renewed interest in the gun violence reduction team, or GVRT, and you worked there for over 3 years. Why did you choose to work with this team, and what was that work actually like? I think there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes. So I'd say any of my interest in it started first being a patrol officer and responding to dozens, if not hundreds, of shootings during my time on patrol. I was assigned from the time I was off probation until the time I joined the gun violence reduction team to North Precinct, where at the time especially there was a lot of gun violence. A lot of it was still happening there. It's kind of spread out all over the city at this point, and especially into East Portland, but North Precinct, due to the historical ties as well, is the area for it. There's still a lot of history there. And one, seeing how prevalent the problem was, it was eye-opening, because you don't hear about it always on the media. You might get a couple here and there. But as a police officer and seeing how many shootings there actually were, and now looking back to the time when I was on patrol, it's nothing compared to where it is now. It's a big problem. And then also seeing and working around the officers who were on, was gang enforcement team in that time, seeing the reputation that unit had within the community, but especially in the Black community, who was the most and heavily impacted by gun violence. I wanted to be a part of that. I would be, as a patrol officer, rolling up and maybe doing a traffic stop on somebody who was and happened to be African American. I might get yelled at and called a racist. You're only stopping me because I'm Black. You're profiling me, XYZ. And then I would have an officer who was on the gang enforcement team who would come up and cover me and happen to be in the area, and then they would walk up, and immediately that person might have had prior contacts with them before, and as soon as they either recognize the officer or saw, that patch, it immediately calmed down the situation. Any sort of comments about me being racist or profiling somebody for, stopping them for those reasons, it ended because of the relationship and the respect that they had built up over the many years before I even became part of the team. But seeing that was huge for me, because I will not put myself in a situation or participate or work for something that I can't go to sleep at night and something I don't believe in. And getting to see that was kind of what really sparked my interest in joining the team.
And what was the work like on the daily basis or weekly basis? Can you describe just kind of, even when it was really busy?
Yes, it was
not very much sleep, I can say that.
No.
So if you were on call for the week and you were working for that week, kind of describe what that's like.
Yes. Little sleep, very little sleep. It became a trend, especially when I was on call. It was not uncommon. A late night of getting called out might have been 3 page outs, anywhere from 5 to 7, staying awake for 25, 30 hours at a time because of responding to shootings. It's a sacrifice. To work in that unit, it was a sacrifice for sure. But it's a unit that you you have to have a passion and a care for, and all of the people that I worked with had a true passion and care to do that work, because if you didn't, you wouldn't survive, to be honest. It's a lot of work. It's a huge time commitment. It is hard on you mentally, physically, emotionally. It is a very, as we can see, political and hot button topic to be working in that unit, which now does not exist. And it takes a lot to be able to live with that every day, but then at the same time, you recognize, and I recognize, the need for that unit and how important it was. And it is devastating that it is not here.
So can you describe, you talked about responding to the scene, so that's after the fact. Can you describe what it's like? What were you guys doing out there? Who were you interacting with? What was that like?
So I was assigned to the afternoon gun violence reduction team unit, and our role was a little bit different, but still part of the greater role of the entire unit, and we were the more proactive piece of fighting gun violence. We responded to shootings. That was one of the biggest things we did, whether we were working at the time and on duty or responding to being called out. We would go respond to shootings. We would process crime scenes, communicate and interview the people that were there and victims of that, interview witnesses. And then also the other part of what we did was the proactive part of it, which was always information-based. That's probably one of the biggest misnomers, or maybe lack of understandings of what our unit did, is we didn't just go around and stop random Black people, period, never. I would never be a part of something that did that. Everything we did was information-based and intelligence-based, and based off of the relationships that we had with either those who may have been in gangs, or from their family members, or from people who've been victimized by it, or from working with community partners and all the outreach organizations that we did. And it was with the intention of preventing another shooting.
And so it's hard, you talk about talking to witnesses and victims. It's hard to capture a lot of the emotion that happens at a scene, especially if somebody's shot, and certainly if somebody's killed. Those are things that are harder to describe, but it sounds like, there's lots of information gathering, but the relationship piece that is super important. So given all that and the commitment you had, for over 3 years with that team, what were your thoughts and feelings about hearing that the team was being dismantled?
Insulting is kind of the first word that comes to mind, because I had to find out about that by watching a press conference. And to be emotionally invested into that unit, because like I said, it's a commitment to be there. You have to want to be there. It is not for everybody. It is hard. It's very hard work. And so no, I do not define myself by my job alone, but I do care, and it's the reason I'm a police officer and still am, because I care about making some fraction of a difference in the world. It does me no good to sit and complain about things that I don't agree with. I have to be some part of the solution and put myself out there and try to make a difference. And I may not ever know what that is, but I have to at least try. And so when I found out the unit was getting cut, I was devastated. It was so hard on me emotionally, because I have friendships there. We are all so close working in that unit. Not sleeping, staying up for 30 hours straight. There's a bond there, but also a commonality that everybody's there because they want to be there and they truly care about the work. And now the consequences of that are more than apparent.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit to talk about the protests, because that's been a really relevant piece of all this. Can you share what some of the impacts have been on you personally in the last couple of months?
I would say probably the most devastating part, like I said, was my unit getting cut. And now I am now assigned to Central Precinct, really ripped away from the precinct, North Precinct, where I truly love and have been working there for 6.5, almost 7 years, working in that precinct, working assigned districts, getting to know all of the people and the businesses and the citizens in that district, the relationships that I've built, with my fellow officers, but people in the community as well. And then coming to work in an area where I don't necessarily work, and then getting to be downtown, dealing with which I don't want to call them protesters down here, but the people that are actively trying to destroy and create division, and it is very hard.
And it's been difficult in your personal life as well.
Yes, for everybody. I would say many conversations I've had with fellow coworkers who have lost friendships because of what is going on. Family members are not speaking to each other. Lines are being drawn in the sand, essentially, and people are cutting each other off, even though they know that maybe me not personally or my coworker not personally didn't do anything that is going on right now. But because of wearing this uniform and working for the police bureau and being a police officer, people are automatically assuming a lot of things about you and deciding, I don't want to hear anything you have to say, and I'm going to cut you off and not speak.
So what makes this better?
I think people need to maybe turn off their social media, stop going on long-winded tangents about what is going on, and actually talk to somebody. I think a lot of what is going on now, it's a lot of, you're hearing one side of the story, but you're not hearing the other side. And I don't mean saying you're not hearing the police side, because that's not necessarily the case, but from doing the work that I did working in the gun violence reduction team, and then especially even in my final days there and the final shootings that I responded to before I came to Central Precinct, the voices of those this is most directly impacting, that being the African American community, they are not being heard. I think there's a segment of it being heard, but they are not being heard. And it shows that we had 100 shootings in just the month of July. And it's to just hear that number is one thing, but to truly think about that, when we had 35 shootings, I believe, at the same time last year, 15 homicides in 1 month, when our normal average for an entire year is 28 to 30. And to say those statistics is one thing, but to think about the lives behind that is also being lost. The devastation that this is having on families who are having multiple family members and friends murdered, never going to see them again. And it keeps happening and continues to happen. And they didn't have any say in what is going on. And that is one of the saddest parts of this. And just watching it and not being able to do something about it.
So any final thoughts that you want to share?
I would hope, I guess my hope in doing this and why I even participated is because I think we need to just sit down and have a true conversation. A lot of what's being said in various forms of media is, we need to have a conversation, but that's not what's happening. Conversations are not super effective when there is a whole group of people versus another person. It needs to be smaller. It needs to be maybe one-on-one. And we need to be able to listen to another perspective without interruption, without disagreeing, just listen. And then you let the other person talk and let them listen. And then you can start having a bigger conversation about what is going on. And I could say I'll open it up for myself and really any other officer here. If you truly would like to hear or talk to an officer and understand what is going on in the world, what is happening in your department, what is happening in your agency, all of us would happily have that conversation. But the time to do it is not going to be, during a protest when there's 100 of people screaming at you. You're not going to have an effective conversation. But I encourage you, if you see an officer driving around on the road, myself included, and you flag me down and say, hey, can I ask you some questions? 100%, I would be happy to do that, and I know all of my coworkers would be willing to do that as well. The other part of it that my ask of the community, because I think this is what the community has been asking of us, is to not judge me because of the uniform that I wear. That has been the biggest issue with, I think, what is going on now, is that people see me at work in uniform and assume XYZ about me. They assume they know what my values are. They think they know what my experiences in life have been, that I've lived a life of privilege, and because my skin looks white, that I have had a certain upbringing, or automatically think that I can't understand, where they're coming from and how they grow up. And probably why I purposely waited until now to say it, but it's important, is I am half black and half white. And the sad part is that I'm even having to say that, because I think we have gotten so lost in the division of police versus black, or black versus white, or white versus minority, that it is just creating more division. We're not getting anywhere. I have the three sides of the perspective. I see this as being white, I see this as being black, I see this as being a police officer, and all I see out of it is division. And there's a point where we need to just have a conversation about it.
I thank you for being so open